One of my favorite things to do is to talk to people who are just starting to get interested in the Catholic faith. Many of them are Protestants who've been raised with an anti-Catholic view. Some are atheists who didn't have a belief in God at all. And even some are people who were technically Catholics but never really got into their faith. And for whatever reason now, they're starting to become interested in it. I love talking to people in that situation. It's like their eyes are starting to get wide and they're like, what does this mean? It's so much fun. So what I want to do is share with you right now 5 things that people who are beginning to get interested in Catholicism should do. Number 1, ask the tough questions. Ask the tough questions. Sometimes people have this mindset that, well, when you become a Catholic or you get it, you're going to be brainwashed and you have to check your brain and your intellect at the door and you're not allowed to ask questions. You just have to blindly obey. Friends, nothing could be further from the truth. If you want to really understand Catholicism, you've got to start asking the tough questions. And here's what I mean by the tough questions. Where do we understand what the Christian church even is? Like, ask that question, not just go, well, where's that in the Bible? Ask that question too, but answer the bigger questions. Where do we get the Bible? Where did it come from? How are we supposed to know what's true and what's not true? And what are the ramifications of all of these things? Don't stop asking questions. Start asking questions. And I would encourage you to do this. Make a list of the bigger questions, but the questions behind the questions are super important too. Oftentimes the questions that we will ask as Protestants are different than the ones that we'll ask as Catholics. So like a lot of times Protestants are like, well, where's that in the Bible? Well, that's great, but a bigger question would be, does it matter if that's found in the Bible? And how do we know what the Bible is? And what about this other thing that's found in the Bible? Stuff like that. Here's another question I think is super important. Why are my non-Catholic beliefs the default position? Okay, and hear what I'm saying. Many people start with that question. They think, well, here's my default position is, Mary had other kids. And then we try to go on this investigative journey to discover where we can find the fact that she didn't have kids taught in the Bible or taught in history or whatever. But we always start with like the non-Catholic view as the default. Ask the question, why do we do that? Shouldn't it make more sense to start with what the oldest view of the church is and then work from there? That's what I'm talking about, you guys. Ask these questions. Who's really in charge of this whole thing? Okay, so don't stop asking questions. Keep asking questions, but make sure those questions are the right questions, bigger questions, tougher questions. Number 2, find a priest that you can talk to and be completely real about all of your questions who can help you. That's important. Find a priest who can do that. Guys like me, we can do stuff like that, but I'm not a priest. I don't speak officially for the church, and no other YouTubers are either, okay? Now, you can learn stuff from us. That's great, but you really need to find a priest that you can talk to and sit down with who can know your heart, know your story, know where you're coming from, and that you can just say, look, I don't get this. I do that all the time, by the way. I have priests I can go to and say, all right, I don't understand this. Can you help me with it? That is an invaluable resource to someone who's becoming interested in Catholicism. So find yourself a good priest that you can talk to. Number 3, this one is very important. Get one of these. This is the Catechism of the Catholic Church. Start reading this. Start reading this. This is going to be so helpful for you because when you're just becoming interested in Catholicism, there's a lot of things in your mind probably that you think the Catholic Church teaches that you either don't understand fully or that are just plain wrong. And you have to understand what a gift this is. This is one of the best features of Catholicism is that we can actually go to an authoritative document that can adequately explain what our beliefs are. You'd be shocked at how few churches have anything like that. They might have a statement of faith, they might have a creed, but can you really get to a clear situation where you understand what a denomination teaches? Friends, the Catholic Church has the Catechism, and it's incredible. So make sure you start reading this because a lot of the questions that you're going to have anyway are going to be answered, and your mind's going to get blown when you start reading what the church actually teaches about specific things. So this has to be at the top of your list, my friends. Get yourself a catechism and start reading it. Number 4, start attending Mass. It's funny how many Catholic converts you talk to that never even really attended Mass before they became convinced of Catholicism, or even in some cases, before they even converted. Friends, if you want to get interested in Catholicism, you need to start attending Mass, and even though you can't participate in the Eucharist, it's okay. Start going and learning what's going on. Start to understand what's happening. Start to figure out and make notes and questions. I don't know what this means. And that's why having a priest is helpful, because you can say, I don't get why you guys do that. Don't be afraid you're going to offend anybody. Don't worry if there are things you don't understand. But start going and learning what the Mass is and why it is the way it is, because it's so important you understand what worship is like as a Catholic, because it's so different than anything you've experienced as a non-Catholic. The focus is completely different. The mindset is completely different. The objective is completely different. And if you don't have an understanding of what it is and know the why and the why behind the what of what's going on in the Mass, you're going to struggle. So start attending Mass, and you'll be amazed how the Holy Spirit will begin to work in your heart and show things to you and reveal things to you that you never would have seen coming. Number 5, start reading the Church Fathers. Now, I know everybody talks about that. Like, you hear these converts talk about, well, I was an anti-Catholic, Protestant guy, and then I read this 9-volume set of the Church Fathers, and it blew my mind. And for like regular people who don't have time to read for 40 hours a day or whatever, you can be like, well, how do I read the Church Fathers, and where should I start, and what should I do? There's lots of cool things. One resource that's been helpful to me is this book by Jimmy Akin, okay? Who it's called The Fathers Know Best. And what Jimmy does is he goes through and he talks about who the fathers are. He talks about some of the heresies they were combating. He talks about the doctrines that were being developed in the church. And he has all of these quotes from these church fathers. This is huge, because when you're interested in Catholicism, you're learning about the ancient faith. And to read it from the fathers, it's going to blow your mind. And chances are, if you've grown up outside the Catholic faith, you haven't really read a lot of church fathers. You might have had a few things that you've read, but sometimes they get kind of whitewashed and their Catholicism gets stripped away from them. So read them. This is a good one too. St. Ignatius of Antioch. You can get his letters, okay, that he wrote to the church. This is not a hard thing to read. This goes back to the first and early part of the 2nd century, my friends. Read this stuff. Learn about it. Another book that I found super helpful when I was learning about Catholicism was this book by James Cardinal Gibbons called The Faith of Our Fathers, okay? There are other covers, so if you see one with like a drawing of some old-looking church dudes on it, that's also the same book. But this book is super helpful, written in the first part of the 20th century to people who are not Catholic, to explain the Catholic faith to them. Start reading the Church Fathers. It'll blow your mind. Now, those are the 5 things I want you to start doing, but I'm also taking for granted a couple things. I'm taking for granted that you're sincere in your exploration into Catholicism, that you're really in a place where you're saying, wow, if this is true, would I convert? You have to wrestle with that in the first place, because if you get to a place where you're like, well, even if I find out that the Catholic faith is true, I'm not going to become Catholic, right? You got to wrestle with that. You have to come to grips with the fact that if the Catholic Church is what it claims to be, then when you realize that, you're going to be put in a tough spot. You're going to be put in a position where you have to then say, all right, I must, in good conscience, if I want to follow Jesus, I want to become a part of it. That's dangerous, my friends. That's dangerous. So be careful, but have an open mind and be sincere in your quest, and be willing to count the cost and do what it takes if God reveals that to you. And of course, I believe He will. Now, the second thing that I'm taking for granted that you're doing in this, yes, you're sincere, but I'm also taking for granted that you're praying, that you're someone who is steeped in prayer, and you're asking God's revelation to your life for this stuff, okay? You want God to show you the truth. I'm not saying that God's going to speak to you directly in your heart and say, okay, you should be Catholic, or you should be this, you should be that. It could happen, okay? But I'm taking for granted that you're a person of prayer. And you know what? If you really want like bonus points, start praying some of the prayers that you read about in the Catholic faith. It might be a little freaky to you, but start praying the rosary. Okay, start praying the St. Michael prayer. Start working your way through these things, even if it feels a little weird, and you might experience like a supernatural outpouring of God's Spirit that can come alongside the intellectual things that you're learning and the factual things that you're learning, and it just could help you in immense ways, friends. So I know there are many more I could talk about, but these are my top 5 things that people should do if they're starting to get interested in Catholicism. Hey, if you want more information or more resources, my channel is full of videos like this, so please make sure that you subscribe. Poke around here, you'll find podcasts, you'll find prayer groups, you'll find videos about specific topics. And if you have a question that you're just stumped on and you haven't been able to find somebody, shoot me an email. My email's in the description, and I'd love to talk with you. Remember, this is my favorite thing to talk about, friends. So I'm praying for all of you, and I believe with all my heart that as you step into this journey of discovery, God is going to bless you in incredible ways. Thanks for watching, friends.